right? If they can start to see you asking questions and you not reacting and having the emotional reaction of being upset by what they're saying or things like that, you go a really long way. Over the years, I do a lot of one-on-ones as a leader. That's what really, I think, helps build those relationships and makes them strong, including skip level one-on-ones, so that the people below the managers I'm leading also can see, what my intent is and those things. And I like to do them in different places. And so not just in an office or a conference room, sometimes we'll go to the coffee shop and have a coffee and have a one-on-one during that. Or I like to go and walk outside. When you take somebody outside and get them in an open conversation, you'll get a lot more of their positivity and their growth mindset outside.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Jesse Stafford. He is a leadership coach who helps tech and systems leaders close the gap between doing great work and getting recognized for it. After 18 years leading teams in casino gaming, he now coaches high accountability professionals who want to lead with clarity, communicate their value, and grow without burning out. He is an ACC certified coach who brings the experience of leading real teams across the globe. You're great at the work, let's make it visible. Congrats on your 18 years of leadership and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Why, thank you, Carl. It's great to be here.
So I'm excited to have you on to talk about a big communication problem that a lot of teams struggle with, which is assumptions and how they drive overwork and cause a lot of issues that could be cleared up where there's some simple communication habits. So what are some ways that you've seen assumptions drive overwork and burnout?
Oh, I mean, tons of ways. After leading teams for so many years and even myself watching, I think one of the biggest ways is just, I call it scar tissue, right? It's this buildup of leadership over the years and all the things you read about what managers want and how you're supposed to really behave at the workplace or your previous managers. And so I've watched a lot of people over the years just kind of make assumptions and say, well, I'm going to go do this extra work because I know my manager expects me to without actually even being asked. And then, you end up in a burnout or overwork situation and it's your manager's fault because you knew that they wanted you to do it, whether they asked for it or not. And so you go off and do that work. And so an example I like to use is I was leading a team one time and we had a team member leave. And I went to the project manager and the manager and I said, hey, this person did this amount of work each sprint. We need to make sure we remove that amount of work from our roadmap. And so when they came back, they had only removed about half that. And it turned out that the team decided they could pick up the extra work, right? And as a leader, I thought, man, that's interesting. Maybe they weren't working hard enough. Maybe they didn't have enough in the backlog, whatever. And then a couple of months later, one of those engineers on that team came to me and talked about how busy they were and how they were starting to burn out because of the workload. And I said, well, that's interesting. And I kept asking more questions and digging in. And I learned that they had just taken their estimates, assuming they were going to have to pick up extra work. And so just padded their estimates in a way that made it so they could pick up the slack for that person leaving. And their manager and project manager never caught on. And so they overworked themselves, but it was in some way an assumption that they were believing they needed to pick up the slack.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because without that clear communication, and even though you had tried to say to them, let's remove it from the schedule, don't take up the extra work, having the mindset or the not double checking to make sure that it's that's what you want them to do is to actually pick it up, and that it's just weird how that even though you told them do this, they still assume that you'd be happy or really wanted them to take up this work and then now they're dealing with the consequences of the burnout because they're pushing themselves too much. So what is it that you found can prevent that? Because it seems like you went in and told them don't do this thing you just did.
Yeah.
So is it just a matter of checking in more, or like what's the solution to those sort of scenarios? Because it seems like something that really needs to be nipped in the bud before it causes all like because burnout, you can't just I'll recover over a weekend to be fine again. So like how do you prevent that happening in the future?
I think I can offer you two ideas here. One from the perspective of an employee who is recognizing some assumptions their manager might have of them or something like that. And I like to use a topic from David Marquette in his book, Turn the Ship Around, where he taught his whole crew to say, I plan to, right? Or I intend to. So when you go to your manager, it's like, hey, I'm planning to do this. What do you think? Or I intend to do this work. This is the estimate I have for it. And that gives you a good conversation start with your manager to unearth the assumptions that you may or may not have about what they want, right? And hopefully when you go to them with that plan, they'll tell you, oh, that's more than I was expecting, right? As a leader, it's a little harder, right? Because you have to try to trust your team and those things. And so it really is trying to get them to ask her questions about what their plans are, right? How are you going to approach this? How much work do you think it is? Let's be real about the estimate and those kinds of things, so that you can kind of dig in and push back and get them to share that plan with you, right? Leaning on that David Marquette. I intend to find ways to ask them good open-ended questions that'll get that intent out of them.
Yeah, I can see how having those conversations before they just take on the work, or oh, by the way, I've been doing this for the past month and I'm burning out, makes a lot more sense. But I think it's when you the whole relationship between a leader and their team definitely has to have a certain foundation to it of already having some open communication for it to work. And it seems like that kind of prerequisite to being able to have these sort of conversations in a way that's productive. The leader already needs to have a good rapport with their team and already have established a safe, communication channels where people can bring up, hey, I'm intending to do this. How's that work, and not risk any sort of kind of blowback. Or so it seems like the problem of people making all these assumptions is from lack of communication, but it also seems like it's like a canary in a coal mine sort of thing, where if this is a problem for you, there's probably deeper leadership team dynamic problems underneath that have led to this. And so what are some of those that it sounds like you probably worked with some teams that have some of these issues. What are some ways to dig deeper and understand how to build that foundation initially?
I think you can, go and being a coach and asking good questions and bringing in that coaching and curiosity mindset from the beginning, right? If they can start to see you asking questions and you not reacting and having the emotional reaction of being upset by what they're saying or things like that, you go a really long way. Over the years, I do a lot of one-on-ones as a leader. That's what really, I think, helps build those relationships and makes them strong, including skip level one-on-ones, so that the people below the managers I'm leading also can see, what my intent is and those things. And I like to do them in different places. And so not just in an office or a conference room, sometimes we'll go to the coffee shop and have a coffee and have a one-on-one during that. Or I like to go and walk outside. When you take somebody outside and get them in an open conversation, you'll get a lot more of their positivity and their growth mindset outside, surprisingly. And so, you can build a lot of trust really quickly by just, taking them outside of the normal environment and having a good open conversation.
Yeah, I like that suggestion, especially the getting outside of the office, because there is, especially if it's a fairly stereotypical cubicles with the fluorescent lighting and the kind of bland taupish interior, it can that environment puts people in a certain mindset versus when they're out walking or at a coffee shop. So if you're trying to connect with them on a deeper level, then having that change of environment can really open them up in ways that they wouldn't be as easy to access if it was still in an office or a conference room. And I
Yeah.
also, it reminded me of something I've heard a number of guests talk about, that there's this, they have built a habit of just having little 10 minutes of beginning of each meeting of just personal conversation, of not talking about work, but just asking people about their lives and showing that you're interested in about who they are as a whole person, not just as like their job title on the team. And I think that is something that I can see fitting into the habits to build as a leader that'll make the issues you've been talking about, people making assumptions and overworking and burning out, less likely to happen, because you're already going to be more connected and have that trusted channel of communication where people are willing to come with you saying, hey, like my mom's sick, I'm going to overload. I'm intended to try and do this, but I'm now I'm like, and they help them just like connect with you better so that you know how they're doing and aren't suddenly blindsided by the someone burning out.
Yeah, for sure. I think, definitely remembering their wife's name and their kids' names and like some of the stuff that they did recently. And, as we started this, asking about how the holidays are going and things like that, right? I will add though that building that trust is kind of a double-edged sword, because at some level you start to get team members who want to work hard because they trust and respect you, right? And they know what you're asking for is a big deal. And you still have to go in and with the same intent of trying to help them understand, whether they're getting to the point of overworking or not. And the open relationship helps you call it out, right? Hey, that's way too much. Let's scale it back a little bit right now.
Yeah, I think especially with the trend lately of employees kind of quiet quitting and doing the bare minimum, the building a stronger relationship and then worrying about people wanting to work harder because they actually like their boss is a better problem to have, I'd say. But then, like you said, it does allow you to have those more direct conversations about, hey, I don't want you to overwork yourself. I appreciate that you care enough and are wanting to do a good job because we have this rapport, but I don't want to see you overexerting and burning out, because then that's not good for anyone. I think having that overall, the desire to communicate with people and connect with them as individuals and people, not just as employees or their role on the team, is a big mindset shift. I don't think a lot of people in like executive roles or in like manager roles really are thinking on that level as much as they need to be.
Yeah, I think it's way too easy to get wrapped up in being a professional all the time, right? And I like to think of it like this, right? Like, I'm surrounded by humans. I'm trying to help them grow and make their careers and make their lives what they want. At the same time, though, we have a business to run. And so we're going to pause. We're going to have a good conversation about what the business needs from us. And that may be a lot or that may be a little, but I really do like to frame it that way, right? Like, hey, this is the business objective today. Let's talk about how we can accomplish that and what it really needs from you and me. And then we'll go be humans after the conversation or before the conversation, right? And so that we can build that good relationship and have a strong conversation about what our company needs from us.
Yeah, I think that having that, there's the idea that, because like a whole like kind of work-life balance doesn't really exist. It's basically just, it's who the person is. There's all of it together, and you don't change who you are, or you shouldn't really, like you're the same person in the office versus outside the office. It's not like there's a work you and a personal life you that are completely separate and don't influence each other. So understanding the personal and professional side of things and finding that balance where you can have both without going too far in either extreme. Because if you have too much of a connection, it's too personal, that it's detrimental to the business and the work, that's not good. But you also don't want to have the burnout where people are sacrificing and kind of killing themselves by overworking and not getting enough sleep or exercise and not eating well. And that's not good either. But it's about finding that mix that works. And it's not going to always be the same amount of both all the time for each person. And so there's actually something I was thinking I want to connect you with after we finish recording. He's another guest of mine named Bobby Dutton. He actually invented for his business an app. It's a little like dashboard thing that every time before his employees get paid, they answer on a scale of 1 to 5 how happy, how stressed, and how utilized they are. And it just allows them to have a quick dashboard, like who's likely to be burning out, who can help them pick up slack, and all these things that just make getting ahead of this sort of being proactive about it a lot easier from a leadership standpoint. And he's actually launched it as a standalone app now. So as you've been talking, like, okay, I got to connect this guy to Bobby because it's such an important aspect of leader, especially if you're leading a bunch of people, to be able to touch in and prevent this burnout before it happens. Because as someone who has burnt out before, it takes months to bounce back from that. And if you're, for the employees, that's not fair for them, and for the team and the company, it's not fair for them because yeah, they might have been working hard for a while, but now they're gone because they need to recover. Otherwise they can't keep going at the pace. So having the tools and the mindset and the habits built really needs to start from that leadership perspective, because once you as a leader set the tone and make that first step and give to your team what they need to feel like they can open and communicate, then all of these issues with assumptions and burnout and overworking or underworking are all able to be resolved and prevented in the future, because there's just a stronger relationship being built on a professional and a personal level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to saying I plan to or I intend to really helps you understand what they're capable of, right? And so like you said, every person's showing up with a different amount of capacity every day. And even me, right? Like I'll show up and some days 100% looks like 110 and some days 100% looks like 50%, right? And I tell my team all the time, like, I expect your best every day you show up here, but I don't expect your best to be the same every day, right? And so it's really important to think about that and try to understand how they're showing up and where they're coming from. And a lot of times, right, like you said, they're a whole person. So stuff going on outside of work is absolutely affecting what's going on in work. And sometimes that's part of the deal. Maybe sometimes we have to get over something outside of work in order to get the business going forward.
Yeah, I think having that bigger picture of and seeing people as someone who has a life outside of work and has other things that are impacting it, and when if they aren't, like if their best that day is not what their best was yesterday, having the emotional intelligence and the empathy to take a pause and ask, okay, like I notice like something you kind of seem like a little different today. What's going on? What do you need help with? How are things going? Instead of just reacting and jumping down the throat because their best that day wasn't the best that it was normally, shows a lot more maturity and strength as a leader than I think most people are used to experiencing with their managers.
I think so too. I think another thing I like to tell leaders is that we're emotional, right? That's part of, learning to be a coach. Is part of learning to be a leader, is understanding that we all bring emotion to the table. What's important as a leader is that we need to use emotion as input to how we react, not react because we're having an emotion, right? It's really easy to get angry as a leader. I do it all the time still. It's somebody will come say something to me and I'm like, ooh, that is rough, right? But I'll pause and I'll get myself under composure and react the way I need to for the situation, and then go be angry later on a walk by myself, right? And so that's the kind of stuff that's really important to sort out, and it helps prevent some of that burnout and build the trust, right? If your team knows you're not going to flip your lid or lose it and yell, you're going to have a much stronger team.
Yeah, the way I've heard it is the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is that knee-jerk, off-the-cuff emotional response. Responding is still has some emotion involved, but there's usually a pause and a deep breath and a assessment of what's going on, and it's a much more, you're still feeling, you're still expressing the emotion, but it is A controlled release, not an explosion or an eruption.
And I mean, to add to that, I'll tell my team what I'm feeling right now, right? They'll bring me something and be like, wow, I am really upset by that. Or I'm a little angry that that's going on. Or I'm disappointed in that outcome, right? It's never about them specifically, but I think when you're open about the emotions you're feeling, it gives them permission to be more open with you.
I really like that. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Jesse. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you want to connect with myself or Jesse, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.